When you picture a Belgian Malinois, uh, what immediately comes to mind?
No, that's easy.
Right. Because if you are like most people, you are probably picturing like a literal missile covered in fur.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you think of those police dogs scaling chain link fences or military dogs dropping out of helicopters or, well, maybe just that one incredibly intense dog at your local park that just never, ever stops demanding you throw the ball.
They are completely relentless
They are the absolute definition of relentless physical intensity.
because they are entirely wired for work. I mean, their whole identity, and not just in how we observe them, but how they actually process the world around them, it's built on this immense, almost explosive drive.
Yeah.
For a Malinois, moving and solving and executing tasks, it isn't just a fun hobby for them, it is a biological imperative.
Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We have pulled together a massive stack of sources for you today.
Some really great stuff, too.
Yeah, we've got veterinary longevity studies, behavioral case files from working dog trainers, and some really fascinating canine neurology notes. And we are taking all of this to answer one very specific, very complicated question.
What happens when the clock finally catches up to that kind of elite canine athlete?
Exactly.
Mm.
Because you don't just put a pro athlete on the couch the day they retire and expect them to be perfectly fine.
No, of course not.
So how do you handle an animal whose entire central nervous system is wired for high-octane work, when their body actually starts to age?
It is a deeply, deeply misunderstood transition.
It really is.
And it catches a shocking number of owners completely off guard. I mean, we culturally associate this specific breed so heavily with youth and explosive power that watching that intensity begin to soften it can feel incredibly jarring for people.
Oh, I bet.
But before we get into the biology of it, we really have to establish a baseline philosophy from the research here.
Okay.
Aging in a working breed is not a story of decline. It is simply a story of a relationship-changing shape.
Right.
So the goal of diving into these sources for you today isn't to figure out how to, grieve the loss of the dog's younger self. It's to understand the actual mechanisms of aging so you can actively support this biological shift.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how to actually care for them, we first have to pinpoint when they hit this senior stage, right?
Right.
And according to the veterinary sources we reviewed, for a Malinois, spotting that transition is notoriously difficult. Generally, the literature puts them in the senior category around, 7 to 9 years old?
Yeah, roughly 7 to 9.
Which is a bit later than your giant breed dogs, I think.
It is. The cellular aging rate in a medium to large breed like a Malinois gives them a slightly longer runway than, say, a Great Dane.
Makes sense.
But honestly, the calendar on the wall is practically useless compared to the behavioral and physical markers happening right in your living room.
Because they don't just wake up old one day.
Exactly. For a high-drive working dog, aging isn't a brick wall they suddenly crash into at age 8. It is a very long, very subtle slope.
A slope? Okay, I like that visual, but I do have to push back on the practicality of it just a bit.
Oh, sure.
If you are listening to this and you've got an 8-year-old Malinois and that dog is still vibrating with excitement at the front door.
Still ready to go.
Yeah, still practically tearing the leash off the wall to go work.
Yeah.
How on earth are you supposed to spot a slope when you are walking on it with the dog every single day?
Well, it's tricky because the biology of their prey drive actually works against the owner here.
What do you mean?
When a Malinois goes into working drive, their brain literally floods with adrenaline and dopamine.
Okay.
And that neurochemical cocktail literally blocks their pain receptors.
Wait, really?
Oh, yeah. They genuinely do not feel the arthritis or the muscle fatigue while they are chasing that ball. They only feel it 3 hours later when they cool down on the living room rug.
Oh, wow. So they're actively hiding it from themselves, basically.
Exactly. And because the physical changes unfold so slowly over months or years, you rarely get a dramatic cinematic moment where the dog suddenly acts old.
Right, there's no big limp or sudden collapse.
No, you have to look for the micro shifts. Things like taking a half step longer to recover from a sprint.
Or like a slight hesitation before jumping into the back of a truck.
Yes, or a newfound selectivity about which toys actually trigger that massive dopamine response.
Right, because you see them every single day, so your own brain normalizes those tiny physical shifts.
Which is why it's so easy to miss.
Which means the dog is going to naturally mask the slope, and you are going to naturally overlook it unless you actively change your strategy.
And this requires a total strategic overhaul of how you manage their physical engine. The most critical functional change we see in the literature is sarcopenia.
which is muscle loss, right?
Right, the natural age-related loss of muscle mass. And for a breed built entirely on structural power, losing muscle isn't just an aesthetic issue.
It's functional.
Highly functional. Muscle is what stabilizes aging joints. When the muscle wastes away, the joints take the full, brutal impact of every single step.
Which is where the research highlights a huge trap for owners. You realize the dog is aging, and you swing wildly into one of two dangerous extremes.
Yes, the two extremes are so common.
The first one is excessive caution. You see the dog slowing down, you panic about hurting their joints, and you basically retire them to the couch.
Which is an absolute disaster.
Because stopping exercise accelerates that sarcopenia. The muscle just melts away, the dog gains weight, and you essentially cause the exact physical decline you were trying so hard to prevent.
Exactly. But then the second extreme is equally dangerous, and that's habitual intensity.
Right.
The owner assumes that because the dog wants to work, they should work.
Because they're still barking at the door.
Yeah, so they keep pushing the same grueling, high-impact routines. And because of that adrenaline masking we just talked about, the dog will happily tear its own ligaments or grind down its cartilage just to please you.
It is exactly like driving a high-mileage sports car.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right, dogs drive it, still desperately wants to go 150 miles an hour. But the suspension, like the cartilage serving as the shock absorbers in their elbows and hips, it is dried out. The synovial fluid just isn't replenishing the way it used to.
Right, the hardware is wearing down.
So you can't just park the car in the garage forever and let the engine seize up, but you absolutely have to stop redlining it at every traffic light.
Exactly.
So if this breed is so willing to keep going regardless of comfort, how do we actually find that middle path without breaking them?
What's fascinating here is that the owner essentially has to change their own job title. You are no longer their high-performance coach. You have to become their physical therapist.
Oh, I like that.
The solution to the exercise dilemma isn't less exercise. It is different exercise. You have to meticulously strip away the sustained, high-impact, gravity-heavy work.
Okay, so no more Frisbee backflips.
Exactly. You swap out the 6-foot vertical jumps for low-impact, highly controlled resistance work.
Swimming is a perfect example from the veterinary notes here. You put them in the water, and they are getting incredible cardiovascular work. They are maintaining that vital muscle mass, but you have entirely removed gravity from the equation.
Swimming is fantastic. Or even structured, varied pace walks on soft, uneven terrain like sand or dirt trails.
Okay, because the uneven ground makes them work harder.
Yeah, it engages their core and stabilizing muscles without that concussive force of sprinting on solid concrete.
Right.
And establishing this new baseline shouldn't be a guessing game, by the way. It really requires a veterinarian.
Definitely.
Because if your dog is hesitating at the bottom of the stairs, that isn't just a quirky personality change. It is usually addressable joint inflammation.
Right. They aren't just being stubborn.
No, and a vet can prescribe targeted supplements, things like glucosamine and chondroitin, to actually support cartilage repair, or they can offer anti-inflammatories that give the dog the baseline comfort they need to keep moving safely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We can dial in this physical engine, swap the jumps for the pool and manage the joints. But a rested body doesn't solve the most defining feature of the Belgian Malinois.
Their mind.
Their central nervous system. A Malinois' brain simply does not retire on the same timeline as its body.
It really doesn't. The neurological need to solve problems and execute tasks, it does not evaporate just because their hips are a little stiff.
Right.
The brain's plasticity and its sheer demand for engagement remain incredibly high. But much like mirroring the physical shift, the form of that mental engagement has to evolve.
Because they can't physically do what they used to.
Right. They might lack the stamina for an hour of intense obedience drills, but if you don't give that brain a job, it will turn on itself.
And the sources mention scent work as a massive tool here.
Oh, it's huge.
And the biology behind why it works is wild. Like, a dog's olfactory bulb is vastly larger than ours relative to brain size,
Oh,
right?
vastly. It takes up so much real estate in their brain.
So when they're actively tracking a scent, the amount of focused neural processing required is immense.
It is exhausting for them.
The notes literally say 10 to 15 minutes of intense structured scent work can elevate their heart rate and drain their mental battery just as effectively as a 2-mile run, with zero wear and tear on the joints.
It's the ultimate hack. Scent work, puzzle toys, or even just running through slow, methodical, highly familiar training routines.
Just keeping them thinking.
Exactly. You are creating scenarios where they feel successful and purposeful without physically breaking them down.
But this brings up a huge blind spot for owners. Because if that mental engagement tapers off alongside the physical activity, like if an owner just assumes the dog is old and wants to sleep all day, the dog will often become deeply withdrawn.
They absolutely do.
They might look lethargic, slow, and depressed. So are we accidentally misdiagnosing a lack of mental stimulation as physical decline?
That happens constantly.
Yeah.
An active, working breed mind that is suddenly deprived of an outlet will absolutely manifest physically. The dog looks like they are rapidly aging when in reality they are just experiencing profound, crushing boredom.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. However, the neurology notes we reviewed make a crucial distinction here because we have to separate behavioral boredom from actual canine cognitive dysfunction, or CCD.
Right, which is essentially the canine equivalent of Alzheimer's disease.
Exactly the same biological mechanism, actually. In CCD, you have amyloid plaques building up in the brain, disrupting those neural pathways.
So it's not just them being understimulated.
No, real cognitive aging looks very different than boredom. A bored dog will perk right up if you offer them a job. A dog experiencing CCD will exhibit systemic confusion.
Like what? What should people look for?
You'll see changes in their circadian rhythm, so pacing the house at 3 a.m. They might get stuck behind furniture in a living room they've known for a decade.
Oh, wow.
Or they might suddenly fail to recognize a familiar family member. And if you observe those specific signs, it requires immediate veterinary intervention.
Because you can actually treat it, right?
Sure. Well, you can't cure it, but there are medications and dietary changes like significantly increased omega-3 fatty acids that can slow that plaque buildup down.
So what does this all mean? We've got the physical therapist routine for the body and the scent work puzzles for the mind. But the research also points heavily to the invisible adjustments.
The underlying biological hardware changes.
Yeah, the stuff we can't necessarily see on the surface. And the first major red flag in the literature here is weight management.
Oh, weight management is critical. The basal metabolic rate of a senior dog drops significantly.
Their body just requires less energy to maintain itself.
Right, but in the vast majority of households, the feeding ritual remains completely static. The scoop of kibble stays the exact same size year after year.
Which makes sense, it's just habit.
Exactly. So as the dog's activity naturally shifts from sprinting to walking, they enter a caloric surplus, and the weight quietly creeps up on them.
And when we consider everything we just discussed about vulnerable cartilage and sarcopenia, excess weight is catastrophic.
It is the worst thing you can do.
Because every single extra pound of fat places exponential kinetic force on those aging joints.
Every single pound. And beyond metabolism, there is the subtle fading of their senses.
Right.
And dogs are so brilliant at navigating the world through memory and smell that they can completely mask sensory decline from their owners.
The research talks about lenticular sclerosis, which makes their eyes look a bit cloudy, though it's different from cataracts, right?
Yeah, it's a normal aging change in the lens. And there's also high-frequency hearing loss.
But they hide it so well.
Because a dog creates a spatial map of your house in their head. They can be functionally losing their vision in dim light, but they will still navigate around your coffee table perfectly.
That's incredible.
It really is. What gives it away are the behavioral anomalies. Like, they suddenly flinch when you reach for them from the side.
Because they literally didn't see your hand coming.
Exactly. Or they startle easily if you walk up behind them. Or maybe they hesitate to go out into the dark backyard at night.
And the tragic part is that an owner might see that flinch and think, oh, my dog's temperament is degrading. They're getting anxious or aggressive in their old age.
Yes.
And in reality, the poor dog just physically couldn't hear you walking up to them.
This raises an important question, though. How well do we actually observe our dogs versus how well we think we observe them?
Oh, that's a great point.
There's a massive gap between a dog functionally masking its decline in the comfort of a familiar living room and a dog being thoroughly objectively evaluated by a medical professional.
Which is why, as these biological shifts accelerate, the cadence of your veterinary visits really must increase.
Absolutely. Going to the vet every 6 months instead of once a year isn't a sign that your dog is broken.
Right.
It's just giving yourself a fighting chance to catch these subtle issues.
Because a vet is looking at things we just can't see.
Oh.
Like proprioception, how well the dog knows where its feet are.
Yeah, they are feeling for muscle asymmetry that might indicate the dog is silently favoring one leg. They are checking eye pressure and joint fluid.
These are metrics an owner simply cannot measure with the naked eye.
No, not at all.
And by managing these invisible factors, you empower the dog to navigate their changing reality with actual confidence.
Which perfectly transitions us to the emotional core of this entire deep dive.
It really does. Because doing all of this,
Mm-hmm.
becoming the physical therapist, orchestrating the scent work, monitoring the caloric intake, laying down rugs so they don't slip on the hardwood floors,
Mm-hmm.
it requires a tremendous amount of focus.
It is a lot of work.
But according to the behavioral studies, this level of care actually transforms the relationship between you and the dog into something really profound.
The bond doesn't fade just because the explosive athleticism does. If anything, the necessity of all this careful management forces the bond to deepen.
Yeah.
Think about the history here. You have years, potentially a decade, of shared training and shared routines.
Right.
That creates a remarkably refined, almost telepathic level of communication.
It makes me think of learning a new language.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in the early years of the Malinois, when they are young and chaotic, you are practically shouting commands. You are using huge, exaggerated gestures. You are constantly projecting your intentions just to cut through their high arousal state.
Oh, absolutely. You have to be so loud.
But by the time they are a senior, you are perfectly fluent in one another. You don't need to shout anymore. Like a slight shift in your body weight, a specific exhalation, a glance across the kitchen, and they know exactly what you're asking.
That is so true.
And conversely, you learn to read their micro-expressions. You know the exact difference between their "I'm tired" pant and their "I'm in pain" paint.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that fluency and that deep established trust become the dog's greatest asset.
Because aging is scary.
It is. The aging process, the fading senses, the stiffer joints, these are inherently vulnerable states for an animal whose wild instincts tell them vulnerability is dangerous. But a dog that trusts its human completely. A dog that knows you have been a consistent, reliable partner through all those chaotic working years, they will lean into that trust. They actually allow themselves to be cared for.
Continuing to prioritize that quiet companionship. Finding joy in a slow, structured walk instead of a frantic game of fetch is really how you honor everything they gave you when they were a fur-covered missile.
You are transitioning from managing a high-performance tool to caring for a lifelong partner.
I love that.
It requires more patience and a totally different skill set, but for owners willing to put in the detective work, these twilight years are consistently reported as the most rewarding chapter of the dog's life.
Well, let's wrap this up and synthesize everything we've explored today.
Sounds good.
We have mapped out the biological timeline of the senior Malinois, establishing that aging is a subtle, easily masked slope, largely due to their adrenaline-driven ability to just hide their pain. We explored the critical difference between less exercise and different exercise, to combat muscle loss without destroying those vulnerable joints.
The physical therapist approach.
Exactly. We broke down the mechanics of the unretiring mind, using scent work to burn cognitive energy so we don't tragically mistake sheer boredom for physical decline. And finally, we looked at the invisible metabolic and sensory shifts that require us to step up as our dog's most observant advocate.
It is a comprehensive shift in the mechanics of ownership, but it all stems from a deep respect for what the animal was actually bred to be.
It truly is. And I want to leave you, our listener, with a final lingering thought to mull over as we close out this deep dive.
Oh, I'm ready.
Consider how we approach our most demanding, high-investment relationships, whether that's with a relentlessly driven dog, a high-stakes career, or even a human partner. We put so much focus on the intense, exhausting, high-octane years of building the foundation. But what if those chaotic years aren't actually the main event? What if all that relentless work, all that frantic energy and training at the beginning is actually just the prerequisite? What if you were just putting in the grueling hours to earn the right to experience the profound, quiet fluency of the years that follow? It puts a whole new perspective on that missile covered in fur.
It really does.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.